to win back Jasper Ainsworth's sweetheart. I became the kidnapper's new hostage. Jasper said the snipers were in position and I wouldn't be in danger. But he didn't know that in 5 minutes, the kidnapper would detonate the bomb strapped to his body, taking me with him to our deaths. Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. The kidnapper pressed a gun against my head and pushed Lorna Evans towards Jasper Ainsworth. I watched as Jasper anxiously checked Lorna over. Then, his brow relaxed, and he held her tightly. Throughout the entire ordeal, Jasper never once turned to look at me. Host, the system's cold voice came through. It seems the mission to win over Jasper Ainsworth has failed again. This was the 3rd year of my marriage to Jasper, and my 9th attempt to win his heart. Unfortunately, he still hadn't fallen in love with me. 10 minutes earlier, Jasper had unhesitatingly agreed to the hostage exchange on my behalf. Anora, you're an Owen. They won't dare harm you, Jasper said, with a hint of reluctance. He then signaled to the bodyguard beside him. The snipers are in position. Lorna is delicate, I don't want her involved in this bloody business. The bodyguard's hand gripped my shoulder, subtly applying pressure. I couldn't move, so I resignedly said all right, while inwardly cursing. Jasper didn't know that in 5 minutes, the kidnapper would detonate the bomb strapped to his body, taking me with him. I was familiar with this circumstance. Before death, I skillfully lowered my pain sensitivity. I still remember my first attempt to win Jasper's heart. Lorna and I were trapped in a fire, and Jasper scooped up the unconscious Lorna. He glanced at me, injured nearby, hastily saying wait for me before disappearing from my sight. At that time, I naively thought Jasper would come back to save me. It wasn't until I was burned alive that I learned Jasper was busy professing his love to Lorna, who had regained consciousness. Perhaps because the system saw how agonizing my death was. I was given the ability to adjust my pain sensitivity afterwards. The system told me I had one last chance left. I knew that if I failed again, not only would my wish remain unfulfilled, but I would also be completely erased. Anora Owen, I don't like you. Have you no shame? With a sharp crack, Jasper Ainsworth forcefully slapped away my hand that was grasping his arm. A familiar scene, familiar words, a familiar hellish beginning. I had returned to the day Jasper was forced to marry me. Jasper's voice wasn't quiet, and the surrounding guests instantly turned to look. They whispered amongst themselves, their gazes clearly mocking. I ignored those unfriendly stares and the stinging pain on the back of my hand. I just silently followed behind Jasper, waiting for the first opportunity to arrive. As Jasper passed through the grand hall, the crystal chandelier overhead would suddenly fall. The previous times, I had always precisely pulled him to the side. Then, taking advantage of the moment, I would fall into his arms and shed a few tears of fear. Seeing this, Jasper wouldn't have the heart to speak harshly to me again. But I never imagined that this time, Lorna Evans would be standing under that lamp. Jasper, not wanting Lorna to see me, turned and threatened me viciously. Anora, if you don't want to die, get lost. But the next second, following my gaze, he noticed the swaying lamp above Lorna's head. Lorna, watch out! Jasper shouted in terror, throwing himself forcefully on top of Lorna. Jasper! I reached out anxiously but grasped empty air, only managing to rush forward and push them both away with all my might. Jasper couldn't be hurt. If he died, my mission would be instantly judged a failure. In that moment, I didn't even have time to lower my pain sensitivity. It felt as if my internal organs had been smashed, the intense pain causing me to black out instantly. That night, Jasper's and my wedding went viral. Owen family's daughter bleeds at wedding venue. Who is the mysterious woman in Ainsworth heir's arms? The grand and magnificent wedding ended up as a joke. In a photo circulating widely online, Jasper was kneeling on the ground, holding Lorna, his shocked gaze fixed on a spot not far away. There lay I, collapsed in a pool of blood, my fate uncertain. When I woke up, Jasper Ainsworth was nowhere to be seen. Lorna Evans had an asthma attack that day due to the shock and was sent to the hospital along with me. Jasper only glanced at me briefly before staying by Lorna's side the entire time. My mom, frustrated and disappointed, asked me, "Does it have to be Jasper?" Mom, if anything happened to Jasper, I wouldn't be able to go on living. I replied reluctantly, telling the truth in a roundabout way. Unfortunately, Jasper overheard this as he was about to enter the room. He looked at me with a complex expression, seeming troubled yet confused. He thanked me and then apologized. Anora, Lorna isn't feeling well yet, so she can't come to thank you in person. Jasper added casually after my mum left, as if Lorna was the one who had been seriously injured. I nodded indifferently, as I didn't want to see Lorna's pretentious act anyway. The doctor said my condition was unstable and that someone needed to stay with me at all times. Perhaps to repay me for saving his life, Jasper volunteered to be my caregiver. However, not long after, he received a call from Lorna. Her coquettish voice came through the phone. Jasper, are you with Anora? I suddenly have a craving for dumplings from that shop on West Street. I wonder if... I'll go buy some now, Jasper replied without hesitation, not even letting Lorna finish her sentence. I clearly saw the smile that escaped from the corner of Jasper's lips. This love-struck idiot. After hanging up, Jasper seemed to remember the doctor's instructions and looked at me with difficulty. I knew that dumpling shop always had a long queue. I understandingly told Jasper not to worry about me. After only a moment's hesitation, he stood up. I'm sorry, I'll be back as soon as I can, he said, nodding slightly to me and casually asking if I wanted any dumplings. I shook my head gently, showing him a sad and lonely profile. Jasper indeed paused, and as he turned to leave, a flash of guilt crossed his face. But how could I have known things would turn out like this? As soon as Jasper left, I felt a sharp pain in my head. Fighting the dizziness, I pressed the call button. The nurse urgently pushed me into the ICU, but they couldn't reach Jasper to sign the consent form. The system told me that Jasper was queuing to buy dumplings and hadn't heard his phone ring at all. What a disaster! I shouldn't have pretended to be so understanding earlier just to gain his favor. Filled with regret, I rolled my eyes and lost consciousness completely. When I woke up again, I couldn't help but laugh at the sight of the handprint on Jasper's face. Anora Owen, Jasper turned his face away in annoyance. Did you do that on purpose? I was only gone for 10 minutes, and you managed to land yourself in the ICU? I shook my head, trying hard to suppress my schadenfreude, and timidly said, I'm sorry. Perhaps feeling guilty, Jasper hesitated for a moment before sheepishly closing his mouth. That day, Jasper stayed with me, which was unprecedented, until Lorna inconvenienced him once again. Jasper, is Anora awake? I'm feeling a bit unwell after eating those dumplings. Would you mind calling a doctor for me? For Miss Evans' request, Jasper was, of course, more than happy to oblige. Anora, stay put. I'll help you with the discharge next week, Jasper instructed condescendingly before hurrying off. I nodded, but didn't take his words to heart. Jasper had made similar promises before, but without fail, he always broke them because of Lorna. After Jasper left, I noticed a bowl of dumplings on the table. They had been sitting for too long, soaking up all the broth and turning into an unappetizing, sticky mess. I tossed them into the bin without a second thought. On the day of my discharge, Lorna happened to be moving house. Jasper sent his assistant to take me home. When I woke up on the sofa, I found myself covered with Jasper's coat. Jasper was working in his study, so I decided to seize the opportunity to curry favor and brought him a cup of hot milk. Thank you, Jasper said without looking up, frowning as he rubbed his chest. Alarm bells immediately went off in my head. Jasper had a congenital heart condition, and he always made that gesture when he felt unwell. Where are your pills? I asked anxiously, noticing Jasper's lips had turned a bluish purple. I accidentally left them at Lorna's place. She said she'd return them in a few days once she's sorted through her moving boxes. Jasper's nonchalant attitude made my blood boil instantly. Jasper, is it your heart that's the problem or your brain? I couldn't help but raise my voice. Doesn't Lorna know how important those pills are? In a few days, you might be nothing but ashes. Jasper's expression darkened as soon as I mentioned Lorna. He stood up abruptly and grabbed my arm. Anora Owen, get out, he said coldly. Jasper's grip was strong, and I felt a searing pain in my back. It hurts, my wound has reopened. I cried out, but Jasper ignored me and continued to drag me towards the door. Jasper, let go! I struggled to break free, but to no avail. In desperation, I bit down on his arm. Jasper suddenly stopped in his tracks. He released his grip on me and doubled over in pain. With a loud thud, I watched helplessly as Jasper collapsed right in front of me. I searched everywhere, but Jasper's backup medication was gone. I had never seen Jasper's condition this severe before, and I felt helpless. The system warned me that Jasper could only hold on for 20 more minutes. The nearest city hospital was just a 5-minute drive away. Thanks to the system, I managed to lift Jasper onto my back. Ouch! A sharp pain shot through my back wound, and I couldn't help but let out a soft groan. Warm liquid soaked through both our clothes as I struggled to move towards the car park. Jasper had regained consciousness at some point and weakly tried to struggle. Put me down, you're bleeding. His movement threw me off balance, and I stumbled, nearly falling. He ignored me when I cried out in pain, and now he's making things difficult when I'm trying to save him. Stop moving! I snapped in frustration, giving Jasper's bottom a hard smack. You. Whether from anger or embarrassment, he passed out again mid-sentence. I stuffed Jasper into the car, but as soon as I touched the steering wheel, I shuddered violently. Painful memories came flooding back. My limbs felt paralyzed, and unstoppable tears streamed down my face. I cried and begged the system to help me. The next moment, the car started moving. Help! Help! As soon as we reached the hospital, I shouted while dragging Jasper out of the car. Jasper absolutely couldn't be in danger. I watched anxiously as he was carried away on a stretcher, then my legs gave out. I collapsed to my knees, covering my face as I sobbed. I knew this hospital all too well. I had accompanied Jasper here many times. Each time, I would casually pass by that hospital room, peeking through the glass in the door at the person lying in the bed. He looked as peaceful as if he were sleeping, just like he used to when lying beside me. But now, not only could I not stay by his side, I found myself praying over and over for another man's safety. Jasper Ainsworth and I were admitted to the same hospital room. He even regained consciousness half a day before I did. This is the first time I've seen someone end up in the ICU from excessive grief. Jasper's words sounded somewhat mocking, but his eyes held a hint of confusion. He asked me, seemingly casually, if I was really that afraid of him dying. I stared into his eyes, so similar to that person's, and nodded earnestly. Jasper, you know that if anything happened to you, I couldn't go on living either. This was the second time I had said those words. Jasper froze for a long while before muttering "you're mental" and turning his back to me, saying nothing more. I saw a faint blush creep up his ears. The air grew quiet, but in my ears the system alarms kept sounding. Jasper's heart rate was continuing to spike. After some time, Jasper suddenly sat up. His expression was conflicted as he furrowed his brow. After a long pause, he said resignedly, I won't do this again. This was the first time Jasper had made me a promise, after I had once again saved his life. Before we were discharged, Jasper told me his cousin was also in this hospital. Tomorrow is my cousin's birthday. I'll take you to see him, Jasper said, then awkwardly added, after all, you are my wife in name. My heart skipped a beat, though not because of that last statement. Suppressing my inner excitement, I nodded and said okay. The next day, I bought a bouquet of purple irises. Jasper glanced at them and remarked what a coincidence it was. He said his cousin's home had quite a collection of iris paintings. Is that so? What a coincidence indeed, I agreed lightly. I followed Jasper to stand by that person's bedside. My eyes traced his features over and over again. Fighting back the sting in my nose, I blinked hard to keep the tears from falling. Matthew, just wait a little longer. Once I've won over Jasper, you'll be able to wake up. On the way back, I was in a daze. Jasper called my name several times, but I didn't respond. Have you lost your mind? Jasper complained, honking the horn forcefully. You were staring at the cousin the whole time at the hospital. And now you're completely out of it. What's wrong with you? Jasper eyed me suspiciously. I was afraid that he might discover something. I lied that Matthew looked so much like him, it made me feel a bit disoriented. Recalling how he had scared me into the ICU before, Jasper patiently comforted me with a few words. In my previous attempts, Jasper had never noticed my attention to Matthew. But now, he was clearly starting to pay attention to my every move. Perhaps the chandelier incident had truly created a butterfly effect. Jasper was very busy after being discharged from the hospital, and my progress stalled. 3 months later, Jasper offered to accompany me to the temple. The weather was beautiful that day, and surprisingly, Lorna didn't call Jasper away. He walked up the 99 steps in front of the temple with me. Halfway through, finding me too slow, he even took my hand. He couldn't understand why I came to pray every month. To pray for my beloved, wishing for his speedy recovery and a long, worry-free life. I murmured softly, gazing devoutly at the Buddha statue before me. I didn't notice Jasper's intense stare beside me. On our way down the mountain, Jasper suddenly called out to me. "Enora," he said, rubbing his nose, his tone awkward yet serious. "My heart won't give out anytime soon, so you don't need to come here specially every month." Jasper had misunderstood my prayers before the Buddha. I lowered my head and smiled, not bothering to explain. I just went along with it and said a few more nice words to appease him. That night, we stayed at a guest house halfway up the mountain. The night view was beautiful, and Jasper said he wanted to stargaze with me. But just as he finished speaking, he received a call from Lorna. The power went out at Lorna's house. She was afraid of the dark and wanted Jasper to keep her company. Jasper looked at me hesitantly, uncertain for the first time. "Don't go, please." I suddenly felt the urge to test him, so I tugged on his sleeve and pleaded pitifully. Jasper pressed his lips together in silence, his expression changing repeatedly. A loud noise suddenly came from the other end of the phone. "Lorna! Are you all right?" Jasper snapped back to attention. He no longer looked at me, only anxiously asking after Lorna over and over. "Jasper, I can't move my leg. Please come quickly." Lorna seemed to be hurt. She kept crying and urging Jasper to come. "Wait for me, I'll be right there." Jasper's brows furrowed as he yanked his arm from my grasp. Caught off guard, I fell to the ground, hitting my head on the stone table nearby. Jasper turned at the sound, seeming to want to help me up. But Lorna's voice on the phone stopped him in his tracks. After Jasper left, I received a message from him. He asked if I had fallen badly earlier. He also said he'd come pick me up first thing in the morning. I tossed the phone aside with a bitter laugh. Ignoring the wound on my forehead, I sat in the courtyard and began counting stars. Matthew once told me that each star in the sky represents someone's wish. But suddenly it started to rain, turning everything a gloomy gray. I could no longer find the star that belonged to me. "System, will I fail again this time?" The system didn't answer me, only letting out a sympathetic sigh. In that moment, pain, grievance, sorrow, weariness, all the negative emotions surged up at once. I couldn't hold back anymore and broke down crying. I cried so hard I couldn't tell if it was rain or tears on my face. Until an umbrella shielded me from the wind and rain. "Enora." A familiar voice rang out. I looked up abruptly, not daring to believe my eyes. I had never seen Jasper Ainsworth look so disheveled before. His hair was wet and plastered messily to his forehead. "Enora," Jasper panted, asking me with evident displeasure. "Do you plan on crying here all night?" I looked at the flush spreading across Jasper's face, filled with concern. "Jasper, is your heart all right?" Upon hearing this, Jasper stared at me with a complex expression, as if wanting to speak but hesitating. The air was so quiet that only the sound of rain could be heard. But the system once again sounded an alarm. It was because of Jasper's heartbeat that had yet to calm down after so long. A sigh of resignation broke the silence. The corners of Jasper's mouth turned upwards, tinged with a hint of helpless affection. "Enora." He suddenly bent down close to me, his voice gentler than ever before. His breath fanned across my face. "If you keep looking at me like that, I'm going to kiss you." Jasper softly told me to close my eyes. As he drew closer and closer, I startled violently, barely managing to turn my head aside. His warm lips landed on the corner of my mouth. This was my 10th attempt at winning Jasper over. Yet it was also the first time he had ever kissed me. Jasper explained to me that after the heavy rain, he had felt rather uneasy. So he ignored Lorna's pleas for him to stay and rushed back to the guest house in the rain to find me. It's a good thing I came back, otherwise you'd still be out there getting soaked. Though his words sounded like a complaint, Jasper's eyes were full of tender concern. After hearing this, I only managed a stiff word of thanks before lapsing back into silence. Ever since I had dodged Jasper's kiss, the atmosphere between us had grown rather awkward. This was the first time Jasper had ever left Lorna for my sake. I should have felt happy about it. But instead, that kiss left me troubled. I didn't know how much longer it would take to successfully win Jasper over. Even more worrying was what else Jasper might do to me in the process. This time, my plan was progressing much more smoothly than before. But I found myself caught in a strange dilemma. I wanted to win over Jasper Ainsworth as quickly as possible. Yet I was resistant to the intimate moments that might occur between us. Thankfully, Jasper had been frequently away on business trips, leaving me be. Though conflicted inside, I enjoyed several months of peace. Until one day, when a scene from my past life suddenly replayed itself. 2 years earlier than before, Lorna Evans was once again taken by kidnappers. The familiar demand came. I was to exchange myself for Lorna. I looked up and met Jasper's gaze, my heart clenching instantly. He stepped forward and embraced me tightly, his body trembling. "I'm sorry, Anora." His lips lingered by my ear, but I clearly heard his reluctant whisper. In that moment, utter despair consumed me. Jasper's bodyguards held my shoulders firmly, just as they had in my past life. This was my last chance. I had to take a risk. Knowing Jasper's weakness for vulnerability, I was about to throw myself at his feet. But what happened next was entirely unexpected. I watched as Jasper turned and raised his hands, walking step by step towards the kidnappers. Jasper said that as CEO of the Ainsworth Group, he was more valuable than a married Owen daughter. The kidnappers were clearly tempted, urging Jasper forward with their guns. I was stunned, my mind going blank except for one repeating thought. Jasper must not come to harm. I struggled frantically, desperately trying to rush forward. But the bodyguards held me back with iron grips. "Jasper! Come back! Come back!" I collapsed to the ground in despair, my vision blurring. I cried out, wanting to tell him the kidnappers had bombs. But the system muted my voice. Lorna was still sobbing and begging Jasper to save her. Jasper paused and turned to look at me for the first time. He gazed at me intently, mouthing, "Don't worry." I shook my head violently, watching helplessly as the kidnapper shoved Lorna aside. The gun was aimed at Jasper's forehead. In the next instant, a spray of blood blossomed in the air. "Ah!" Lorna screamed and fainted. Jasper's face was covered in blood. At his feet lay the dead kidnapper. The bodyguard released me, but my legs were too weak to move. I saw the bodyguard pick up Lorna, while Jasper brushed past them and came straight towards me. "It's all right, Anora. It's over now," Jasper said, pulling me into his arms and gently patting my back to comfort me. My body wouldn't stop shaking. I raised my hand to wipe the blood from his face. Then, using all my strength, I slapped him hard. "Jasper Ainsworth!" I shouted at him in fury. "In your opinion, is Lorna's life the only one that matters? Do you think everyone else is expendable?" Jasper was stunned by my slap but knew he was in the wrong. He kept apologizing over and over. I had come so close to failing my mission completely. I suddenly remembered my 9 previous deaths. I thought of how Jasper had just risked his life without a second thought. All at once, old grudges and new resentments surged up inside me. In my rage, I coughed up blood onto his face. I saw Jasper's eyes widen in terror. "Anora! Anora!" he cried, gripping me tightly and calling my name in desperation. But I felt my eyelids growing heavy, my mind slipping away. Just before I lost consciousness, I thought I heard the system congratulating me. When I awoke, I was still in a daze. The system told me that I had successfully won over Jasper at the moment I passed out. It was my last chance, with less than a year left. I felt like I was in a beautiful dream. Congratulations, host, the system said, sounding pleased. Now you can make your wish. The system explained that on the day I coughed up blood, Jasper had gone mad with worry, carrying me and running outside. If the bodyguards hadn't stopped him and rushed me to hospital, Jasper would likely have ended up in intensive care from the strain on his heart. Host, without a suitable donor for a heart transplant, Jasper has at most 2 years left to live, the system told me. It wanted me to think carefully before making my decision. Should I wish for Jasper to receive a compatible heart, or for Matthew to wake up? System, why do you think I need to consider this? I asked, confused and even a little amused. I endured all that humiliation to win over Jasper for one reason only: to wake Matthew up. From beginning to end, Matthew has always been my one and only choice. Enora, here you go, Jasper said, handing me an unevenly peeled apple. It was evident that, as a pampered young man, Jasper had no experience in caring for others. I waved my hand dismissively, once again making it clear that I didn't want his company. Jasper's shoulders slumped, his expression immediately darkening. Enora, I'm sorry. I promise I won't worry you like this again. I had once told Jasper that if anything happened to him, I wouldn't be able to go on living. At that time, he had promised me there wouldn't be a next time. Yet now, he had broken his word because of the hostage incident. I withdrew my hand, responding coolly, do as you please. After all, my task was complete. Whatever trouble he got himself into now was of no concern to me. I meant what I said, but Jasper mistakenly thought I was still cross with him. Jasper tried hard to make conversation, while I remained listless. Until he suddenly mentioned Matthew, the man I longed for day and night. Enora, my cousin woke up a couple of days ago. The doctors are calling it a miracle. Lorna has actually always fancied my cousin. She cried for ages when she heard the news. I suppose Jasper was trying to distance himself from Lorna in front of me. But I scoffed, rolling my eyes dramatically. I remembered how I had once been consumed with jealousy over Lorna, sarcastically telling Matthew how lucky he was to have both his juniors fall for him. Diane, it's different with you, I recalled Matthew's earnest expression as he said those words. He told me I was the love of his life, destined to meet him. It just so happened that I came into his life as his junior. In that moment when our eyes met, we saw only each other. My name is Diane Wilkinson, and my love is Matthew Butler. We loved each other for years, until a car accident separated us by death. But now, I am Enora Owen. And also, the lawful wife of Matthew Butler's cousin. The night I was discharged from the hospital, I arrived at the restaurant where Jasper Ainsworth and I had agreed to meet. He said he had prepared a surprise for me, and I happened to have something to tell him as well. But I didn't expect that Jasper would stand me up again because of Lorna. He kept explaining on the phone that Lorna had been rejected by Matthew, and was so upset that she got drunk at a bar and was threatening to kill herself. Enora, I'll come to you as soon as I send Lorna home. Jasper apologized and begged me to wait a little longer. Thinking of the matter I had yet to tell him, I could only patiently wait. At 10 p.m., fireworks suddenly burst in the sky. The waiter told me that this was specially prepared for me by Jasper. I looked speechlessly at the empty chair opposite me, thinking the waiter must have quite a sense of humor. I wanted to go home and sleep. Yawning, I gave Jasper a call. A familiar female voice answered. Is this Enora? It's Lorna. Her voice was cloying and sweet, without a hint of drunkenness. Jasper's in the shower. If it's urgent, I can take the phone in to him. Lorna seemed considerate, but her words revealed her intimacy with Jasper. That won't be necessary, I suddenly found it amusing. If you want to have a romantic bath with Jasper, you don't need to make up an excuse. Lorna, frustrated by Matthew, wanted to humiliate me to make herself feel better. But she didn't know that even if she and Jasper were to have a marathon sex session right now, I wouldn't care one bit. On my way back, my phone suddenly received a notification, followed by a flood of messages. Mystery woman appears again, passionately kissing Jasper Ainsworth on the street. The explosive headline instantly piqued my curiosity. Jasper's call came in at that moment. Enora, please don't believe what they're saying online. Lorna was drunk just now and suddenly kissed me. I pushed her away immediately. He was angry and anxious, as if he had suffered a great injustice. I opened the photos under the trending topic. I must say, the paparazzi angle was perfect. In the photo, Lorna was on her tiptoes, eyes closed, kissing Jasper's lips. Although Jasper's face was in shadow and his expression unclear, it didn't suggest any unwillingness on his part at that moment. Perhaps this photo could come in handy in the future? I glanced at the divorce papers waiting for Jasper's signature beside me. Before the PR department could delete the post, I hit the save button. Jasper and I returned home one after another. Without a word, Jasper dropped to his knees in front of me as I sat on the sofa with a loud thud. Was such a grand gesture really necessary for an apology? I was startled, then watched as he lifted one leg, his face flushed, and solemnly pulled out a pair of rings. Jasper said emotionally that this was what he owed me on our wedding day. Hearing his rapid breathing, I couldn't help but worry if he would faint again when we discussed divorce later. I awkwardly avoided the rings and handed over the divorce agreement from beside me. "Nora, did you take out the wrong paper?" Jasper only glanced at it for a moment before his expression turned sour. But in the next second, he saw my signature already on the agreement. Jasper looked at a loss, clearly panicking. "Nora, believe me, there's really nothing between Lorna and me." His eyes instantly turned red with distress. "Last night she threw up all over me. I had my assistant bring me clothes and only thought of finding you after I'd cleaned up, that's why it took so long. Lorna once saved my life. She was suicidal, I really couldn't ignore her. I was wrong. I won't ever abandon you for her again. I promise you, Nora." The incident of Lorna saving Jasper when he had a sudden heart attack had caused quite a stir at our school. Jasper fell in love with Lorna at first sight after he woke up. Since then, he became her most eligible suitor. Come to think of it, my 9 tragic deaths had become part of their play. I couldn't help but feel irritated and impatiently interrupted. "Jasper, you don't need to promise me anything, just hurry up and sign." I had never spoken to Jasper in such a tone before. He froze in place, looking dejected and hurt as he pressed his lips together tightly. I turned my head away, no longer looking at him, but after a while I felt a weight on my knees. I saw Jasper kneeling and wrapping his arms around my waist, gently resting his head on my leg. "Nora, I love you." Jasper's voice was muffled. I tried to stand up, but was held tightly by his hands. "I should have told you long ago. I was wrong. I won't let you suffer any more grievances in the future. So, can we not talk about divorce? Please, Nora." Jasper kept making careful, humble promises to me, like a rejected puppy clumsily trying to please its owner. The moment the task succeeded, I knew Jasper loved me. But I never imagined that the first time he would say he loved me would be right after I brought up divorce. Doesn't this man know that belated love is cheaper than grass? I frowned in disgust. Besides, for me, it was never a matter of whether Jasper was too late or not. "Jasper, I must get a divorce," I said firmly, leaving no room for negotiation. "Because I don't love you." In an instant, Jasper looked up with reddened eyes, staring at me intently. I thought Jasper would angrily question me. But to my surprise, the next second, he grinned like an idiot. He even nuzzled his head affectionately against my chest. Had the shock made him lose his mind? Utterly confused by Jasper's behavior, I heard him say with certainty, "Nora, so you were just speaking out of anger." He seemed quite relieved. "Out of all the reasons for divorce, you actually said you don't love me. You've been in the ICU several times to save me. And you said yourself that if anything happened to me, you wouldn't be able to go on living. You go to the Abbey every month to pray for me. And when I went to see Lorna, you cried alone in the rain. Even when I was taken hostage, you wept bitterly and almost rushed forward to take my place. Nora, all these things, you've done them all for me. How could you possibly not love me?" With each sentence Jasper uttered, his expression grew more sorrowful. As he spoke, the smile on his face disappeared, and his voice began to tremble. A tear suddenly fell onto the back of my hand. "Nora, I'm sorry," came his voice, choked with tears. This wasn't the first time Jasper had apologized to me. but it was the first time I felt the overwhelming guilt and remorse emanating from him. Jasper's tears dampened the divorce papers. I remained silent, only speaking when his emotions had stabilized. I told him I was moving out, and he could come find me when he was willing to divorce. But Jasper stubbornly shook his head, saying he would never agree to a divorce. "Enora, this time it's my turn to chase you. I'll wait until the day you forgive me." The sincerity in Jasper's eyes was identical to Matthew's. For a moment, I was stunned. Jasper firmly believed that my claim of not loving him was just angry words spoken out of a broken heart. I was at a loss for words. In that instant, I even wanted to tell him everything. But then I thought of Matthew, of his relationship with Jasper, and I could only bitterly swallow my impulse. I knew that in my current position, I no longer had the right to be with Matthew. All I wanted now was to divorce Jasper as soon as possible, and then wander through life alone for the rest of my days. Jasper Ainsworth proactively contacted the television station for a live interview. He apologized for the news on our wedding day and clarified the photos that were secretly taken 2 days ago. "I did have feelings for Lorna Evans in the past, but now I only love my wife, Enora Owen," he said. "I've made many mistakes that broke Enora's heart. Now I just want to spend the rest of my life making it up to her." Jasper continued his public self-flagellation, completely ignoring the surprised host beside him. "Enora, I'm sorry. I love you." As the camera zoomed in, the love in Jasper's eyes was so intense it seemed to overflow the screen. The topic trended for days, with polarized comments below. Some called Jasper a scumbag, while others praised him as a real man. Some said a prodigal's return is worth more than gold, while others claimed that belated affection is cheaper than grass. Meanwhile, my phone was nearly exploding with messages. Even my mum was moved by Jasper's face-losing act and tried to persuade me several times. "Enora, I've made some soup for you. When Jasper brings it over tonight, have a good chat with him." I listened to the dial tone on the phone, feeling an instant headache. I only wanted a low-key divorce, but now Jasper had made it known to everyone. My image as a devoted wife was deeply ingrained in people's minds. So I couldn't use lack of feelings as a reason for divorce anymore. Many netizens even left me messages saying I had finally found happiness after suffering, and that I should remember to forgive Jasper after I've finished punishing him. Everyone seemed to favor the drama of, "When I loved you, you didn't care. When I left, you regretted and pursued me." But the most infuriating was the culprit, Jasper. Besides going to my parents' place every day to curry favor, he kept asking me when I planned to punish him. "Enora, now that so many people are watching me, can you give me a chance to start over?" Jasper pleaded pitifully with his magnetic voice. I laughed bitterly, sent this as emotional blackmail, and then promptly blocked his contact. When I saw Jasper Ainsworth at my doorstep, I remembered Mum's mention of sending soup. The evening breeze was cool, and Jasper wore only a thin shirt. His pale face showed weariness, but his eyes lit up instantly upon seeing me. "Enora," Jasper held up the thermos, smiling at me ingratiatingly. "Your mom made you some soup, but I couldn't reach you, so I've been waiting at your door." I took the thermos, thanked him, and politely asked him to leave. But Jasper shamelessly insisted on watching me finish the soup before he'd go. The soup had cooled a bit. I only took one sip before realizing it wasn't made by my mom. It tasted awful. I looked up, catching Jasper's furtive glances, and noticed the plaster on his hand. Understanding dawned on me, so I poured all the soup down the sink right in front of him. "Oh, Enora, you." Jasper couldn't stop me in time and stood behind me, looking like he wanted to say something. "Jasper, has Lorna ever told you that your soup tastes terrible?" As soon as I said it, I saw Jasper's face turn bright red. "No, Enora, it's not. I've never made soup for Lorna. It's my first time, I lacked experience. I won't make mistakes next time." Jasper forced a smile, gently squeezing my hand. "Next time. It would probably taste even worse." Feeling weary, I didn't want to beat around the bush with him anymore. My tone grew harsher. "Jasper, I poured the soup away not just because it tasted awful, but because you made it. I don't need your gestures. Please don't bother me until you agree to the divorce." I thought Jasper would be angry and embarrassed, or at least leave with a cold face. But he just stayed silent, then after a moment, asked out of the blue, "Enora, can I accompany you to the temple tomorrow?" Seeing Jasper's hopeful eyes, I remembered that tomorrow was the day to pray for Matthew at temple. But Matthew had already woken up, so I didn't need to go there frequently anymore. Thinking of this, I shook my head at Jasper. "Jasper, I don't need you to accompany me." I stared at Jasper's drooping mouth, thought for a moment, and added, "I won't be going there anymore." As soon as I finished speaking, the disappointment on Jasper's face instantly turned to despair. That night, Jasper left with reddened eyes, forcing a smile as he bid me good night. He didn't bother me for a while, until one day. He spoke gravely, saying he wanted to see me. I agreed, but Jasper stood me up. "Enora," Jasper's voice was urgent on the phone. "I'm at my cousin's place. Something's happened to him. I can't come see you." My heart skipped several beats. "Matthew. What happened to him?" My mind went blank. I turned and ran desperately towards Matthew's house. From a distance, I saw someone sitting on the edge of the rooftop. The figure was thin, looking as if it might be blown away by the wind at any moment. Tears burst from my eyes. I could only run faster and faster. "Matthew, Diane is dead, but I'm still here for you. If you really jump, I'll end my life too." As I reached the rooftop entrance, I heard Lorna's tearful pleas. "Miss Evans, I don't know what my parents did to make you misunderstand." The voice I'd been longing to hear spoke up. "Whether you live or die, what does it have to do with me?" Matthew, usually so gentle, now asked coldly. Lorna turned and left in humiliation. She bumped into me hard as she passed, but I had no time to dwell on it. "Matthew Butler!" I shouted. The two remaining on the roof both turned their heads. Matthew's eyes were full of confusion. He didn't recognize me. "Enora, why are you here?" Jasper looked at my tear-stained face, equally bewildered. "Jasper, don't ask. Please, I beg you, go downstairs and wait for us," I pleaded. Jasper's expression changed several times before he finally left in silence. On the vast rooftop, only Matthew and I remained. "Mr. Butler, please come down, will you?" I carefully approached Matthew step by step. Matthew shook his head, revealing a polite yet distant smile. "Miss Owen, I'm sorry for startling you at our first meeting." He said he was happy because he would soon see his love. I watched as his body leaned further outward. "No. Matthew. Diane isn't dead." In desperation, I blurted out. Matthew paused, turning his head to look at me in bewilderment. "Matthew, Diane isn't dead. She just can't reveal herself to you." The pent-up emotions finally burst forth, and I cried out loudly. "She's become someone else. She's even married to another man. She can never return to your side. Matthew, she can't come back." My heart felt like it was being torn apart, and I fell to my knees in pain. Until I fell into a warm embrace. "Diane, is that you?" Matthew asked me repeatedly in a trembling voice. I cried so hard I lost my voice, only able to nod desperately as I hugged him tightly. I heard Matthew softly ask if I hadn't revealed myself to him because of Jasper. I frowned, unsure how to explain to him. But Matthew seemed to misunderstand, even comforting me, telling me not to feel troubled. "Diane, if you only want to be Enora Owen, to be Jasper's wife, I will keep this secret. Diane, I just want you to be happy." Matthew's smile looked worse than crying, making me both angry and heartbroken at the same time. "Idiot, are you just going to give me up to someone else so generously?" I grumbled discontentedly, then lifted my head to kiss Matthew's lips. I was so focused, both body and mind, that I didn't hear the approaching footsteps. "Enora, what are you doing?" Jasper's furious roar came through. He stared at Matthew and me with wide eyes, unable to believe what he was seeing. "Enora Owen, is this really why you insisted on divorcing me? My brother has only been awake for a short while, and you're already hooking up with him?" After coming down from the rooftop, Jasper kept taunting me with cold sarcasm. Seeing his face growing increasingly pale as he spoke, I couldn't help but ask if he had brought his medication. When you were kissing my brother just now, why weren't you concerned about whether my heart could take it? Jasper raised his voice, mockingly questioning me. Under Jasper's resentful gaze, I hesitated repeatedly before finally telling him everything. From my rebirth to the system and my mission to win him over to save Matthew. The only thing I didn't mention was the 9 failed attempts where I died tragically. Since I had already succeeded, bringing that up would seem like I was deliberately trying to gain sympathy. At first, Jasper furrowed his brow tightly, but later his expression became blank. So when you said you didn't love me, it was true, wasn't it? Seeing me nod, Jasper violently kicked over the coffee table in front of me, his expression twisting with anger. Anora Owen, you played me, how dare you play me? Jasper gritted his teeth, looking as if he wanted to rush over and tear me apart. But in the next second, streams of tears flowed from his eyes. I had never seen Jasper look so desperate before. He cried silently, appearing so fragile that it seemed he would shatter at the slightest touch. I opened my mouth, but didn't know how to comfort him. Anora, Jasper's hoarse voice came, you are the most hateful woman I've ever met. Jasper gripped my chin forcefully. I was forced to lift my head and meet his gaze. Hatred, unwillingness, pain, sorrow. Jasper's expression changed again and again, until finally, he smiled bitterly as if resigned to his fate. I should hate you, Anora Owen. He murmured, resting his head on my shoulder in defeat. But why can't I bring myself to do it? That day, Jasper Ainsworth and I parted on bad terms. Anora, don't even think about divorcing me, Jasper said with unprecedented seriousness. He claimed I had deceived him and he wouldn't let me have my way. After Jasper left, Matthew asked me with concern if I wanted to talk to him. I silently shook my head. Matthew was a deep thinker. If he knew the truth, he would only blame himself more. Diane, no matter what happens, I'll always be by your side, Matthew said, placing a gentle kiss on my forehead without pressing further. I told Matthew I would resolve things with Jasper as soon as possible. However, when every solicitor in the city refused to take on my divorce case, I couldn't help but call Jasper to ask what he was playing at. Anora, you cheated on me, and you expect me to step aside for your new love? Jasper's words were harsh from the start. I explained, suppressing my annoyance. Jasper, if it weren't for that accident, I would never have revealed my identity to Matthew. I wanted divorce only because I don't love you. Jasper angrily told me to shut up. Anora, you were the one who came after me in the first place. Divorce? Don't even dream about it. Jasper's stubbornness infuriated me completely. I retorted cruelly, Jasper, our marriage exists in name only. I could easily get a virginity test at the hospital. If you won't divorce me, I'll find male models to cuckold you every day. Jasper hung up without another word. As I regained my composure, I realized my words had been too harsh. A deliberate cough sounded behind me. I turned to see Matthew standing in the doorway. Diane, I didn't mean to eavesdrop, Matthew said, his expression conflicted but his eyes twinkling with amusement. It's just that after much consideration, I still want to make my case. Before you start looking for male models, would you consider me first? I knew Matthew was just teasing me, but I still blushed instantly. After Matthew left, it wasn't long before my phone rang. Anora Owen, what was my cousin doing at your place for so long? Jasper's voice was slurred, questioning me accusingly as soon as he spoke. I couldn't be bothered to talk to a drunk person and was about to hang up. But suddenly, he softened his tone and pleaded weakly. Anora, please talk to me, won't you? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have upset you this afternoon. Anora, I miss you so much. How can you be so cruel to me? Tell me what's so great about your cousin. I'll change to be just like him. Anora, my heart hurts so much. If you don't come back, I'm going to throw away my medication. Jasper kept rambling on, and I instantly felt overwhelmed. Remembering what the system had said, I couldn't help but feel irritated. Jasper, your heart can't take this kind of stress. Can't you stop being so reckless? The voice on the other end fell silent abruptly. After a moment of silence, Jasper suddenly asked if I had ever prayed for him during my many visits to the temple. Even just once. His voice was choked with tears. I suddenly remembered the day when Matthew woke up and we went to the abbey to give thanks. I had already stepped out of the chapel, but I turned back and knelt before the altar again, praying for Jasper's happiness and well-being. I thought Matthew's awakening was largely thanks to Jasper's crucial help. But this truth was too cruel. If I told him the real reason, I feared Jasper might actually cough up blood and die from anger. Seeing that I hadn't made a sound for a long time, Jasper let out a self-mocking sneer. "Enora Owen, you really are heartless." With a low murmur, the call was disconnected. I sighed and dialed Jasper's secretary. That night, Jasper Ainsworth was rushed to the hospital again. The doctor said if he continued to push himself recklessly, his heart would only last another year at most. Jasper called me, his voice calm as he said he wanted to see me. We finally agreed to meet 3 days later, on the day of his discharge. However, the night before our meeting, I met with an accident. When I regained consciousness, I found myself lying in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Lorna Evans stood before me, her face contorted with rage. "Enora," her shrill voice pierced the silent night, sending chills down my spine. "You bad woman. Wasn't Jasper enough for you? You had to go and seduce Matthew too. Jasper actually warned me about you. What kind of love potion did you give him?" As she spoke, she slapped me hard across the face twice. The taste of blood immediately filled my mouth. My body felt weak and sore. I remained silent, knowing it would be unwise to provoke her further. But Lorna had lost it. Laughing, she said she would set fire to this place, making it look like I had committed suicide. "You're insane." I spat the blood-mixed saliva onto her face, but she only laughed louder. The warehouse was large. Lorna only lit a corner on the ground floor, not wanting me to die too quickly. She said she wanted me to watch death approach, to suffer excruciating torment. My phone was not far away, but I had no strength to reach it. The system had retired on the day I completed my mission. Without its protection, I could do nothing but wait for death. Being burned alive is truly unbearable. If only I could still adjust my pain sensors. I thought despairingly, until I heard someone calling my name. Accompanied by hurried footsteps, before I could make out who it was, I was tightly embraced. "Jasper? How can it be you?" I stared at Jasper in disbelief. He was still wearing his hospital gown, with a patch of blood staining the back of his hand. "What, disappointed it's not my cousin?" Jasper panted, his tone bitter. Without waiting for my response, he scooped me up in his arms and ran towards the exit. Jasper was focused on avoiding the thick smoke, forgetting about the pile of wooden crates to his side. A deafening crash, and I thought I heard bones breaking. In the moment the crates collapsed, Jasper held me tightly against his chest, shielding me. "Jasper!" Jasper's leg was trapped under the crates. I wanted to help him but was powerless. "Enora." Jasper's face was deathly pale as he coughed up blood. His arms tightened around me. "Don't waste your energy." There was no signal in the warehouse, rendering our mobiles useless. Despair enveloped us once again. "Enora, if Matthew didn't exist, would you have fallen for me?" Jasper's voice broke the silent air abruptly. He looked down at me, stubbornly waiting for an answer. My heart ached, but I still shook my head. "Jasper, when you first abandoned me for Lorna, it was destined that I would never love you. The love I want is mutual respect and unwavering devotion to each other." Jasper's eyes reddened instantly. He forced a smile that looked worse than crying. "Enora, even when I'm dying, you won't lie to me." I softly apologized, but Jasper closed his eyes, no longer looking at me. As the smoke thickened, time seemed to stand still. I thought I heard someone calling my name. Suddenly, Jasper lifted my head, his thumb repeatedly caressing my lips. His gaze was tender, filled with endless longing and reluctance. "Enora, I installed a tracking app on your phone. On my way to find you, after much hesitation, I still sent Matthew a message. Now, I'm incredibly grateful for that decision. No matter how cruel you are to me, I can't bear the thought of you dying with me." A sigh echoed in my ears, and the next moment, my lips met his warm ones. Jasper kissed me fiercely. I bit his lip in desperation. But the kiss only stopped when Matthew arrived. The fire was growing stronger, and the wooden crate was too heavy for Matthew to move. "Matthew, get Enora out first," Jasper said as he handed me over to Matthew. Matthew's arms tightened around me as he noticed my swollen lips. I buried my face in his chest, feeling embarrassed. "Jasper, I'll come back for you right away," Matthew said as he turned to leave. "Enora, does it hurt when you're burned to death?" I heard Jasper's voice. I jerked my head up, not believing my ears. When our eyes met, the sadness in Jasper's was overwhelming. He lowered his head dejectedly, murmuring, "So those dreams were all real." "Matthew," Jasper smiled resignedly at Matthew. "You know, you were able to wake up because I finally fell in love with Enora. But this is actually her 10th attempt to make me love her. She failed 9 times, dying tragically each time because I didn't love her. She endured the pain I caused her, suffered through the agony of death, all to fulfill her wish of waking you up. Cousin, Enora loves you deeply. You must cherish her." I hadn't expected Jasper to have memories of all the previous times, let alone tell Matthew everything. He looked so serious, as if he were speaking his last words. Matthew's arms trembled as he held me, tears falling onto my face. When Matthew and I escaped, the firefighters had arrived at the scene. Matthew set me down and was about to rush back into the fire. But just as he turned, the warehouse suddenly collapsed. I stepped forward and held him tightly. Matthew wept uncontrollably, calling out Jasper like a madman. As I watched the raging flames, I remembered Jasper's eyes gazing at me lovingly. He had smiled, pointing to his lips, telling me he had already received his reward for saving me, and that I shouldn't feel guilty if he died. At that moment, I too couldn't hold back my grief and began to sob loudly. This was the first time Jasper had watched me walk away, and it became our last encounter in this life. Jasper died in that great fire. Lorna had deliberately started the fire, and the gravity of her crime led to legal consequences. But I knew the Ainsworths wouldn't let her off easily. After leaving the fire scene, I fell terribly ill and remained in a daze for a long time. When I finally recovered, I boarded a plane to a faraway place, keeping it a secret from everyone. Jasper had died because of me, and I thought that Matthew and I could no longer be together in this lifetime. After staying in a coastal fishing village for a year, I dreamed of Jasper for the first time. He said Matthew was going mad looking for me. And who would have thought he'd still be helping Matthew even after death? He rambled on about many things, but when I woke up, I only remembered him smiling and saying goodbye at the end. I was startled awake by a knock on the door. "Diane." As I opened the door, I fell into a familiar and comforting embrace.